We continue now at the top of Daf Mem Dalet Amud Beis in Meseches Kiddushin. This is Kiddushin Daf 44b. Rava asked Rav Nachman, "And Nara Mausha Tasa Shliach Lekavel Gita Miad Balas." A Nara, this is according to the Rabbanan who say that a Nara is able to receive her own get. Is she able to appoint a Shliach to receive her get from her husband? Ki Yad Avi Adamya, is her hand like the hand of her father? It has the same strength, the same ability, and she's able to appoint a Shliach. Okay, Chatzar Avi Adamya, or maybe she's just considered like the Chatzar. She's like the courtyard of her father, and that's why she's allowed to receive a get according to the Rabbanan. The Gemara elaborates, Kiyad Avia Damya, she's like the hand of her father, the same strength. Ma Avia Mashvi Shliach, just like her father is able to appoint a Shliach to receive her get. Afinami Mashvi Shliach, so too she can appoint a Shliach to receive her get. O Dilma, or maybe Kechatzer Avia Damya, maybe she's like the courtyard of her father. Viadimata Gita Liyada Lo Megarshan, unless the get reaches her actual hand, she's not divorced, she's not able to appoint a shliach. And the Gemara says, but did Rava really have a doubt about this question? But Rava said in a different context, Kasav get v'nasnu biyad avda. Let's say he writes a get and he puts it in the hand of her servant, meaning of the wife's servant. So the halacha according to Rava is yashana mishmarto hareza get. If her servant is sleeping and is being watched over, so then it's a good get. But neyor eno get. But if he's awake, it's not a good get. And the Gemara says neyor amay eno get. And why is it that when he's awake, it's not a good get? Because it's considered to be a courtyard, but it's not a courtyard that's being protected under her authority, and therefore it's not a chotzer that's able to be kona if the Eved is awake. That's not considered the kind of courtyard that's able to be kona on her behalf. And so the Gemara now says, Now, if you're going to say that the Nara also, she's like the chotzer of her father, so also when the get reaches her hand, it should not be a divorce. It should not be a divorce. She's awake. That would be like a chotzer that's not being protected under the authority of her father. And so the Gemara therefore says, Ella rather liolam pshitale. Really, it's obvious to him, to Rav, it would be obvious to Chiyadavi Adamya. Obviously, when she receives a get, that's like she has the strength, so to speak, of the hand of her father. But the question was as follows: Mi alima kiyadavia, but is her hand so strong, like the hand of her father, lashavya ihi shliach, that she would be able to appoint a shliach? Or low, or maybe not. Maybe her yad is not as strong as the yad of her father. She can't appoint a shliach. Amar lei, so he said back to him, Rav Nachman answered Rava, Eina osa shliach, she's not able to appoint a shliach. In other words, even though the Nara is able to receive her own get, but she cannot appoint a shliach to do so to receive the get. And the Gemara continues, Eisvei Rav asked the question to Rav Nachman from the following Mishnah in Meseches Gittin, Ketana she'amra hiskabeli giti. Let's say a girl who's a minor, she says she appoints a shliach, she says to the shliach, receive my get. Eino get at shiagia get liyod. It's not a good get until the get reaches her hand, meaning to say she's not able to appoint a shliach because she is a minor. Hanara hareza get. The implication is that if she would be a nara, so she'd be considered an adult, then it would be considered a get because she's able to appoint a shliach. And the Gemara says, the case over here is, meaning the case in this Mishnah in Gittin is talking where she didn't have a father. In a situation where the Nara does not have a father, so then she certainly does have the authority to appoint a shliach. But Rav Nachman was talking about a situation where the Nara does have a father, and that's where Rav Nachman was saying she's not able to appoint a shliach. But the Gemara says, Hamida Kotani Seifa, but from the fact that in Gittin, the end of that Mishnah, it says, Imamar Aviyat Sei v'kibel get Leviti, if her father tells a shliach, go and receive a get from my daughter, Imrotza Baal Achzor Bo, so if the husband wants to retract, Lo Yachzor, he's not able to retract, meaning to say, once the husband gives the get to the shliach, that shliach is considered to be the shliach of the daughter, and therefore she's considered to be divorced once the shliach receives the get. And so the Gemara says, from the fact that it says that the father is making some kind of instruction in this very same Mishnah, Mechlal de Reisha b'diyesh la'avaskinan, doesn't that imply that the Reisha, doesn't that imply that the beginning of the Mishnah as well is talking where there is a father? How could you answer that there's no father in this Mishnah? And the Gemara says, Chisure mechzer v'achli katani, there are words missing in this Mishnah Meseches Gittin, and it should read as follows, and really the Reish is talking where there is no father. Ketana sha'amra hiskabeli gite eno get at shiagik get liyada. If a girl who's a minor tries to appoint a shliach, says receive a get from me, it's not a get until it reaches her, that's not considered a good shliach. Hanara harez a get, but if the Nara would appoint the shliach, then it would be a good get, because the Nara is able to appoint a shliach. And then you have to put into the Mishnah, Ba'med devar mamurim kishayin la'av. When is that true? That's if she doesn't have a father. Aval yesh la'ab, but if she has a father, v'yamar avia, and then, so only the Seif is talking where she has a father. And if that father says to a shliach, tzei v'kiba lebita gita, go and receive a get from my daughter, v'rotza ba'al achzer, and the husband wants to retract after he gives the get to the shliach, lo yachzer, he's not able to retract, because of course when the father appoints a shliach, that is considered a shliach lekabbalah. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Itmar, it was stated, Ketana sheniskadsha shalola das avia. Let's say you have a girl that's a minor, and she accepts a kiddushin, and it's not with the knowledge of her father. Amar Shmuel, Shmuel says, tzricha get utzricha miyun. She requires a get, and she also requires miyun. Miyun is generally used, miyun means refusal. That generally applies when, let's say, a girl, she has a kiddushin that's not a kiddushin on a doraisa level. Let's say her brother or her mother, she has no father, let's say her brother or her mother give her away in kiddushin. So in such a situation, she can refuse the marriage, that's called miyun. And a get is generally required when someone is married on a doraisa level. Let's say you have a girl that's a minor that was given away to kiddushin by her father, that's considered a doraisa level kiddushin. There she would require a get. And so over here Shmuel is saying she requires both. She requires a get and she requires miyun. And the Gemara says, Omar Karna. Karna says, Devarim bego. There's something about these words that is surprising, that doesn't make sense. Im get lama miyun. If she requires a get, why should she require miyun? And im miyun lama get. And if she requires miyun, why should she require a get? Meaning it should be one or the other. Either it should be a doraisa kiddushin, or it should be a derabbanan kiddushin, but it should not be both. And the Gemara says, Amru lei, they said to him, Hamarukva uveidine bekafre. Marukva in his court there in Kafre. Let's go ask him the question. And the Gemara continues, Afchua. The Gemara says that they reversed the opinions. In other words, in our version, we have that Shmuel said she requires a get and she requires miyun, and Karna was the one that questioned that. And so when they brought it before Marukva, they reversed it. They said it was Karna that says she requires a get and she requires miyun, and it's Shmuel that was surprised. And again, so they reversed the question, Shadrua lakame de Rav. And so then they sent the question before Rav. Amar Lahu, so he said to them, Hu Elokim, by God, tzricha get utzricha miyun. She requires a get and she requires miyun. In other words, Rav agreed with the original version of what Shmuel said, even though he thought that actually Karna was the one that said that, and Shmuel was the one that questioned it. We'll see Rashi in a moment in terms of why they reversed the question when they brought it before Rav. And then Rav continued and said, V'chas le lazare da Abba bar Abba, there should be mercy to the children of Abba, the son of Abba. That's a reference to Shmuel, the name Hachi, that he would have said this. Meaning to say that Rav, who thought that Shmuel disagreed with what he was saying, really Shmuel had agreed with what Rav was saying, but Rav thought that Shmuel disagreed. He said it does not make any sense. It does not make any sense to say that. Really, you have to say what Shmuel had actually said. Really, the halacha is that she does require both a get and she requires miyun, and Rav was expressing surprise that Shmuel would not have agreed with that. And the Gemara says, V'tayim amai, but what is the reason? Why is it that she requires both? The Karna seemed to ask a good question. If she requires a get, why miyun? If it's miyun, why a get? Amar Ravacha Brei Ravika, Ravacha Brei Ravika says, he explains as follows, Tzricha get shemen nisratze ha'av v'kiddushin. She requires a get because maybe, we don't know, but maybe the father agrees to the kiddushin. So the father is alive in the situation. She receives the kiddushin. Maybe the father agreed to it. And in general, when the father receives a kiddushin on behalf of the daughter, that's a kiddushin doraisa, so that's why she requires a get. But tzricha miyun, but she requires miyun, shema lo nisratze ha'av v'kiddushin, because maybe the father did not agree to the kiddushin, and in that case, if the father did not agree to the kiddushin, but people are going to think that it was a kiddushin, v'yomru, people will say, ein kiddushin tofsin ba'achosa, they're going to think that kiddushin will not take effect with her sister. A person is not able to be mekadesh two sisters. And so therefore, if they think that this kiddushin was a good kiddushin, then as long as this sister is alive, the person is not able to be mekadesh her other sister. It's not going to be a good kiddushin, but that's not true. Because if this kiddushin was not a good kiddushin, the kiddushin would be affected by the sister. So we want people to realize that the kiddushin might be effective by the sister. So we say that miyun is required to indicate that this is not really a kiddushin on a doraisa level. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says, V'husha shidchu. All of this is true if there was an arrangement beforehand, meaning if there was an arrangement that the father was aware of beforehand. So then we have this idea, maybe the father agrees to the kiddushin, maybe it's a doraisa kiddushin. Otherwise, we would have no suspicion that it would be a doraisa kiddushin if there was no arrangement beforehand. And the Gemara continues, Ula Amar, Ula says, Afilu miyun eina tzricha. Even miyun she does not require, meaning to say, if a girl that's a minor receives a kiddushin not with the knowledge of her father, there's no way that's a kiddushin. Not only does she not require a get, she doesn't require miyun either. And the Gemara asks on Ula, Afagav the shidchu, is that true even if they made an arrangement beforehand? Meaning to say, even if the father knew about it beforehand, they made this arrangement, still there's no consideration concerned that it might be a Kiddushin? Of course it might be a Kiddushin. If the father's aware of it, that would be a Kiddushin. And the Gemara answers to that, man de masniha lo masniha. The one that teaches this doesn't teach that. Meaning to say, Ula, who says that she doesn't even require miyun, it's clearly talking about a situation where there was no shidduch. If there was a shidduch, there certainly would be some concern that it might be a Kiddushin. And Rashi explains, Ketanosh and Niskad Shalola Dasavia, again, a girl that's a minor, she receives a Kiddushin not with the knowledge of her father. Lo Amar Lo Avia Lakabla, meaning her father never told her to receive this Kiddushin. V'lo Yada, he didn't know about it. V'ketana HaKol Modem Shem Kiddusha Kiddushin Shalola Daito, when we're talking about a girl that's a minor, meaning to say she's not a Nara yet, so certainly everybody agrees her Kiddushin is nothing if it's without the knowledge of the father. Tzricha get to Tzricha miyan. Shmuel said she requires a get and miyan. Kid Amar Taima L'Kameh, we'll say the reason later on. Amar Karna Devarim Bego, Karna said Devarim Bego, Kach Amar Karna, meaning Karna says as follows, Yesh Devarim Besoch Davar Zeh, there are things within this thing. Kalomar Yesh Teshuva V'Teima V'Divrei Shmuel, meaning there's a refutation, and there's a wonder in the words of Shmuel. And Rashi continues, Amru le b'nei beis hamedrash l'karna, the people of the beis medrash, they said to Karna, Hamarukva uveis dino b'kafrei, Marukva and his court there in Kafrei, Shem Mokum, that was the name of a place, Samuch Lanu, meaning to say, he's nearby us, Marukva's court is nearby. Im Nahardoi sheshmuel sham rachak mimenu, and Nahardoi, where Shmuel is, that's already too far away. Bov initial Marukva, so let's go, we'll ask Marukva the question. Vuaya Av Bezin Mimei Shmuel, Marukva was an Av Bezin during the times of Shmuel, Kedamar b'Moed Katan, like they say in Moed Katan. So essentially they said to Karna, they said, let's go ask, we can't ask Shmuel, instead let's bring this question to Marukva. And Afchua v'Shadru L'Kamei de Rav, so then what they did was they reversed it, and they sent the question to Rav, meaning to say, V'Shem Karna Tzricha Get Umiyan, meaning in the name of Karna, they said that Karna was the one that says she requires get and miyan, Uv'Shem Shmuel Devarim Bego, and then they said that Shmuel was the one that said that didn't make sense. V'Shadru L'Kamei de Rav, and then they sent that question to Rav, Leida Im Yoda L'Divrei Shmuel, to see would Rav agree with Shmuel, Shayacholok Al Hadavar, who is disagreeing. And the reason why they switched things around, and Mishum the Rav Oavo Shel Shmuel Haya, because Rav was a friend of Shmuel, Afchua, so that's why they reversed it. Ula Yoda L'Divrei Karna Shamru B'Shem Shmuel. Maybe he would admit to the words of Karna, which they said is what Shmuel said. In other words, they had a suspicion that maybe when Rav heard that Shmuel said something, so Rav would just automatically agree with Shmuel. So instead they reversed the opinions to see what Rav would say. Rav ended up disagreeing with his friend Shmuel. Abba bar Abba Avua de Shmuel Hava. Abba bar Abba, meaning to say Abba was the father of Shmuel. Utzricha mion shemalo nisratzo Abba Kiddusha v'yomru. And then the Gemara explained why is it that both are required. The reason why mion is required is maybe the father did not agree. Meaning haroa sheitzrachnu a get. If someone sees that we require a get over here, savash nisratzo Abba Kiddusha, so that person will think that the father agreed to the Kiddushin. V'havalei grusha somalia, and then you have a situation where it's a real full Kiddusha. This is a real case of Gerushin. V'shuvein Kiddushin tovsin lo ba'achos, and then the halacha would be that Kiddushin would not work by her sister. Sha'achos grusha so bekares, because the person is not allowed to have Kiddushin with the sister of the person he divorced, with the sister of the girl he divorced. If a person is with that sister, it's kares. And if there was a Kiddushin, people will say the Kiddushin does not even take effect, and a get is not required, but that's not true. It's just a concern we have that there was a Kiddushin with the first sister. It's not that we know for sure that there was a Kiddushin with the first sister, and that's why we give the miyun to indicate that we don't know for sure that Kiddushin with the first sister was effective. And then the Gemara said, but that concern that it's a doraisa Kiddushin is only if there was a shidduch chad amar tzricha get kishashidach bolo avia kodem Kiddushin. When we say a get is required, that's when an arrangement was made with the father before the Kiddushin. There we have a real doubt. Maybe at the end when he heard about it, he agreed with it, and then it's going to be retroactively a Kiddushin. And then Ula said, "Afilu miyun ein tzricha." Even miyun is not required. Shein ma'isa katana klum b'chayav. What the daughter does is nothing when the father is alive. Umatama Gemara afilu shidchu. The Gemara asks on Ula, is that true even if there was an arrangement? Amar Ula da'af miyun ein tzricha. Would Ula say that even miyun is not required when they made an arrangement? Certainly there should be some concern in that case. Umashani demasni holo masni. The Gemara answers, the one who taught that didn't teach this. Meaning, man demasni plugsa de Ula ad Shmuel. The one who said that Ula argues with Shmuel, lo masni ad Shmuel hai perusha the parish bar of Nachman v'usha shidchu. So that individual who learns that Ula argues in Shmuel and says that even Miyun is not required, does not learn that Shmuel was talking about a case of a shidduch, like Rav Nachman said, because again, if there was a shidduch, if there was an arrangement that the father knew about, certainly Ula would not be that lenient. And the Gemara continues, Ika Diamri, there are those that have a different version of Ula, that Ula was not arguing with Shmuel. Rather, Amar Ula made an independent statement. Ketanish and Iskadsha Shalola Dasavi, if a girl that's a minor receives a Kiddushin without the knowledge of her father, Afilu Miyun Ein Atzricha, even Miyun is not required in that case. And Rashi explains the different version. Ika Diamri Amar Ula Milsa Ba'an Pei Nafshehu. In other words, Ula made his own statement. Masni Lo Velo Ad Rav Shmuel. He wasn't responding to Rav and Shmuel. He wasn't arguing with Shmuel. Ustama Kamarli. He was just saying Stam Veloshna Shidchu Veloshna Lo Shidchu. The point is that according to that version, so there was certainly no distinction. Ula was saying it doesn't matter if there was an arrangement or if there was no arrangement. That Kiddushin is considered nothing, and even Miyun is not required. And the Gemara continues, Mesiv Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana asks the following question, V'kulonim Mesu o Mianu o Nisgarshu o Shenimtzu Eilanis, in all of the cases of the 15 cases of Arayas by Yevamis. This is talking about a situation where the husband dies and he has multiple wives, and one of the wives is erva to the brother, so she's not able to do yibum. There's obviously no yibum with her. One of the cases is even her father. Let's say the situation is the husband dies, and this husband, the wife, one of the wives of the husband was his niece, and so now she's falling to her own father to yibum. There's obviously no yibum there, and not only is there no yibum for her, there's no yibum for all of the co-wives as well. That's the halacha of tzaras erva. And so the Mishnah says in Yevamis, but let's say the erva, let's say she dies, or let's say she performed miyun, so she's no longer married to this husband when the husband died, or there was a divorce, or it turned out she was an islandess, so she was never really married to that husband. So in all of those cases, sarosein mutaros. In all of those cases, their co-wives are now mutter, meaning to say there's no problem. It's not a case of tzaras erva anymore, and so it would be mutter for the co-wife to do yibum in such a case. And so the Gemara now says, the kid shaman. Now, in this situation where she's doing miyun, who exactly gave her to Kiddushin in the first place? How did she get married in the first place? This case over here is, in one of the scenarios, the father is certainly alive, because the erva is that she can't do the yibum with her own father. So who gave her away in Kiddushin? Ilema de kidsha avia. If you're going to say that it's her father that gave her to Kiddushin, it was a doraisa Kiddushin, so b'miyun sagila, so how is there even miyun? How is it possible to refuse the marriage? Would miyun be sufficient? Get ma'aliyah boy. The woman would need a real get in such a situation. Elalav, rather is it not the kidsha ihinafsha, that she herself was the one that received the kiddushin, meaning it's exactly our case. It's a girl that's a minor that receives a kiddushin during the lifetime of her father. The katani the boy miyun, and it says explicitly that miyun is required. That seems to be a question on Ula, who says that when the katana gives herself away in kiddushin, afilu miyun ein atzricha, that miyun is not required. Here it sounds like miyun is required. And the Gemara says, "Hu mosiv la v'hu mefarek la." He asked the question, meaning Rav Kahana asked the question, and he answered the question. Kegon shenase la ma'isa yisoma b'chayav. The case could be where the girl becomes like an orphan during the lifetime of her father, meaning there are situations where she leaves the father's reshus, even though the father is still alive, and we will see in a moment. And in that case, certainly, when she accepts the kiddushin, there is going to be miyun. She's not going to require a get. It's still a derabanan kiddushin because she's a minor, but there is going to be a requirement of miyun. And Rashi explains, V'kulan tesvav arayis sheshaninu b'yevamis. Again, these are the 15 cases of arayis that are in Yevamis. Shepotros tzarosein v'tzaros tzarosein min hachalitza min hayibum. In such a case, if even one of the wives is this kind of erva, so the co-wives also are pater from chalitza, pater from yibum. V'yalef lamikra she'erva hanofeles liyibum lefnei karov she'yola b'kares. It's learned out from Psukim that if one of the wives is erva and she falls to her brother-in-law, and that brother-in-law again is a relative where if they were to be together, that would be kares, petura, so she's pater from yibum and chalitza, upotera saras, and also the co-wives are pater. V'chulan ha'arayos, and so the Mishnah is saying in all of these cases, if the wife that's an arayos, if the wife that's erva in mesu kodim shemei sabal, let's say that wife dies before the husband died, or mianu bebal, or she refused the marriage, or niskarsha was divorced, in all of those cases, the cheshemesa v'nafla atzarf nayav hayavam, it means to say that in such a situation, so then when the co-wife falls before the yavam, when the husband dies, lo tzaras erva, at that moment she's not a tzaras erva, because the erva really was not married at that time to the husband. V'lo patra erva tzarosa, and therefore the erva does not pater the co-wife, umutaros liyavim, and therefore the co-wife is mutter to the brother-in-law. Bekatani bito ba'osan tasvav. Now one of the cases there is a daughter. So if one of the cases is a daughter, it means the father's alive. And so it's saying in the Mishnah that if she did miyun while the brother of her father was alive, shehu bala, that's who she married. She married her uncle. Umeiz la'achar miyun, and then he died after the miyun. So the co-wife does do yibum with her father because the miyun essentially separates them. There was no marriage. She was not married to her uncle at the time that the uncle died, and therefore the co-wife does yibum with her father. The whole point over here is, you see, here we have an example of a case where the daughter does do miyun while her father was alive. How could that be such a case? If you're going to say the father gave her away to Kiddushin, would miyun be enough? Of course not. The father gives away the daughter on a doraisa level, and so the get is required. And so then the Gemara said, the case is, no, she did have the Kiddushin. It was not with the knowledge of her father. But essentially she was considered like an orphan during the lifetime of her father. And Rashi explains, the case could be as follows. The father married her off. She had a nisuin with somebody else already, not with the uncle. She was widowed or divorced from that person while she was a minor. So in that case, once she has a marriage, not just an erison, but once she has an nisuin with somebody else, she completely leaves the reshus of her father. During the life of her father, she's now considered like an orphan, meaning she's separated from her father. Once he marries her off, her father has no authority over her. So then she gives herself away to Kiddushin, to her uncle, to the brother of her father. Tahani Kiddushin bo miyun. That kind of a Kiddushin requires miyun. She doesn't need the knowledge of her father anymore because she's not in his reshus. Now you don't need a get in that case. Miyun is enough. Dein ma'isa katana klum, because she's still a minor, and what a minor does not count on a doraisa level. Elamid rabbanan the tikkun nisuin lakatana she'ein la'av. It's just a din rabbanan. There's a concept of marriage for a minor without a father. Shelo yinagu ba minag hafker, that people shouldn't treat her like she's ownerless, like she's nothing. And so that's the situation over here. That's why it's not going to be a question on Ula. And the Gemara continues, Mesev Rav Hamnuna. Rav Hamnuna asks a question from the following brisa. The Tanakama says, by an amohoivriya, when a father sells his daughter who's a minor, ein mochra lekrovim, he's not allowed to sell her to relatives. Mishum Rabbi Eliezer amru mochra lekrovim. In the name of Rabbi Eliezer, they said he is allowed to sell her to relatives. And Rashi explains, ein mochra bito lekrovim she'ein lahem kiddushin ba. The point of the Tanakama is the father can't sell his daughter to relatives where kiddushin wouldn't be effective. Because according to the Tanakama, when a father sells his daughter as an Amma Ivriya, there has to be a possibility of yiyud. Yiyud is when the master marries the Amma Ivriya. That's not possible if they are relatives. So according to the Tanakama, he can't sell her to a relative. And mochra lekrovim, Rabbi Eliezer says, no, he can sell her to a relative. In other words, it says in the pasuk, it indicates in the pasuk that sometimes the sale is only to be a maidservant. There is no possibility of kiddushin. It's fine. He's able to sell her to a relative who she can't have kiddushin with in order to be sold as an Amma Ivriya. There doesn't have to be a possibility of kiddushin according to Rabbi Eliezer. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Mem Hey Amud Aleph.